Our last speaker tonight, by the way, I know what I'm watching on TV tonight. I know what Rebecca's watching on TV tonight. You got HBO, right? Okay, otherwise I'll give you my password. I mean, if you can do that. Cliff Chanin is a friend of mine. He's a great friend in New York. He's the executive director of the 9/11 Memorial Museum, and he's generously arranged for as many of you who RSVP'd to go there and see that, you know, we talk through history, about history repeating itself. And, you know, from the Holocaust, they say never again, and from 9/11, we've always said never forget. And that is a lot of what this week has been about. So let's welcome Cliff Chanin.
Good evening, everybody. I realize I'm standing between you and O'Hara's, so I take that into account. There's a lot I could tell you about the museum. I started on this project as the museum project began in 2005. And while my original idea was to give you a year-by-year account of what had happened, I was discouraged from doing that. So there's one thing that I think is of particular relevance to this audience that I wanted to bring forward. From the earliest days of the project that we were doing, when there was nothing more than a hole in the ground, we would get requests from military, law enforcement, intelligence agencies, first responder agencies, requests just to come and see, to look at that hole in the ground. And as we were developing the project and the museum was taking shape and the memorial was being built, we would get more and more of these requests. And at that point, we really didn't know what to say beyond here's what we're building here, here's what we're doing there. We were still putting a narrative of 9/11 together. But we understood very early that there was a deep, deep hunger within the communities and agencies that are there to protect us, to connect to 9/11. 9/11 is in many ways the origin story of so many of your missions, and we are the keeper of that story. You know, so much that's happened over the years has brought us into close contact and partnership with a long list of folks who are on the agenda here today and in the audience throughout the day. And what we've learned, and it's very unusual for a museum to be in this position, but we are somehow a part of this community. And it took us, to our shame, I would say, longer to understand why that is than it should have done. We opened the museum in May 2014. It's now been a little over 10 years. And even with the difficulties of COVID, we've had nearly 25 million people come visit the museum. 80 million or so have visited the memorial in those years. And among those people have been increasing numbers of folks from the national security enterprise. And little by little, the requests kept coming, and we began to understand what our role was in this. And our role was to tell the story, because what we also came to understand was that what you all do is rooted in the 9/11 story. And that to understand properly what the challenges are, what you all face in doing that, there's a moment where you need to come, take that time, and reconnect with what happened on 9/11. And this, as the years have gone by, has gotten only more important because it's now 23 years. 100 million Americans or more have been born since 9/11. Some number of them are going to be your successors in protecting us. They have no memory of the event. We are literally living the moment where those of us in this field of memory studies, that moment of the transition from memory to history. It is happening right now. And so I look at the young people up there from West Point, not born with any memory of 9/11, and yet they are taking on the mission that you will give to them. And so, the evolution of the museum has been developing a whole set of programs targeted, tailored to the needs of the different agencies that we work with. The examples are legion. I have a list in front of me from academic and military colleges, corporate folks, federal intelligence agencies, law enforcement agencies, local law enforcement, first responders, military. The list is dozens and dozens of agencies. But these are no longer, in many cases, one-offs in our relationships. We are now, as of March 2019, when Director Wray determined that every incoming FBI agent and analyst would come up to the museum for a specially tailored program and a visit. This covers now not just the FBI, but the NYPD, the Port Authority Police, the FDNY, TSA, which engages 10 to 12,000 new employees a year, far too many to come to the museum. But I don't think we have to look very far to understand just how deeply their mission goes back to 9/11. So we have engaged with TSA to produce a film to tell the story of 9/11 to those incoming screeners and agents at the TSA airports around the country. This is now core to our mission. We have understood that we are a resource for what you all do. And now, most recently, that resource is extending itself in directions that, again, we had not anticipated. It was about a year ago that we hosted a group known as the Old Glory Honor Flight. This is a group that came to us from Wisconsin, and they brought roughly 80 veterans of the War on Terror to the museum. And I will tell you, at least as they accounted this for us, they would say to us that there was a lot of resistance to this trip. There were a lot of veterans who'd had difficulty coming home. They didn't really know what they were doing there, but they decided to take the trip. And it was an extraordinary experience for us on the museum side, but for them as well. They came back after the personal difficulties that they'd faced, and they came back to connect with why they were serving in the first place. The most gratifying thing that we heard after they'd gone home was that some 30 of those 80 veterans wound up going for the first time to the VA for medical services. Somehow, through a visit to the museum, they had found a way to connect. This is a resource we had never anticipated, but we understand better and better the power of who we are. The authenticity of place is what we always talk about, how we describe it. And this is something that I hope we can share with you and your partners in the years ahead, as we can think together about how to tailor this story for the needs of the different partners in this enterprise, because this story is the story of the threat that continues, and the people who are fighting the fight need to understand as closely as they can the urgency of 9/11 as it still exists today. I know some of you are heading over to the museum for a tour. I'll give you just a logistical note. There's a flagpole in front of the entrance to the museum. That's where you can meet the guides. For others of you, we're happy to talk about programs and opportunities in the years ahead. Thank you.